Okay.
Great.
All right. So hi, everyone. I'm delighted to see you all here this morning. My name is Lorelei Hansen, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the principal investigator of the Communities in Transition Project, or CIT project, that's funded by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada and Athabasca University. So I'm tickled to be collaborating with ACCA and BCCA today to bring you this session on strengthening communities using the cooperatives model. And I first want to extend a big thank you to Kara Shan, Dan Oler, and Madeline Reed for their hard work in putting this together. The CIT project supports knowledge mobilization of issues and concerns to rural residents in Western Canada. So please check out our website if you haven't already. We have recordings of past events, resources on rural issues, and announcements of events coming up. So before I pass the torch, it's my honor to offer a land acknowledgement. And if you haven't already, I hope you'll also share with us all in the chat the traditional territory on which you're located. So I want to express my appreciation to be a guest on the lands on which I reside, and also acknowledge the waters that nourish them and the many other beings that live there. Known by some as Edmonton, others as Amisk Wachi Waskaikan, or Beaver Hills House. This land is Treaty 6 territory and the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 4, as well as the traditional territories of many First Nations, such as the Nihiho, Denisulaim, Nakota Sioux, Anishinaabe, and Niitsitapi. I acknowledge this as stolen territory, and I work to learn how to live lightly on these lands, to acknowledge them as a living entity, not as a property or as a resource, and to demonstrate deep respect and kindness to all those for whom this is their ancestral territory. I also acknowledge my responsibilities to build relations of reciprocity with Indigenous peoples. In a spirit of humbleness and friendship, I give thanks. So I'd like now to ask Madeline to introduce herself and offer some introductory remarks. Madeline.
Thanks, Lorelei. Good morning, everyone. My name is Madeline Reed, and I'm the Co-op Education Coordinator for both the British Columbia and Alberta Cooperative Associations. Thank you, Lorelei, for that wonderful land acknowledgement. I also, since I have the floor, want to acknowledge that I am based in what is colonially known as Vancouver, or the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and also acknowledge that the BC and Alberta Cooperative Associations are operating across these provinces that are across dozens of traditional territories for dozens of nations. And so acknowledging that our work is taking place across all of these lands, and that these types of relationships are incredibly important to facilitate when doing this type of work. To clarify what the BC and Alberta Cooperative Associations are, we are provincial associations, and we support the cooperative movement across our respective provinces. And our membership of our organizations are the cooperatives that reside in these places. And we see ourselves sort of as the cooperative knowledge and resource center of British Columbia and Alberta. And so our services and work includes providing cooperative education opportunities like this workshop. We also support cooperative development for new cooperatives and or people who want to start cooperatives. We provide ongoing service support such as consulting or legal services. And we also do a lot of government advocacy and lobbying to support the ecosystems of cooperatives across BC and Alberta. And with that, I will pass it over to our presenter, Dan Oler, who's going to take it away from here.
I'll just jump in and I'll give you an introduction to Dan. And also just a couple housekeeping before we get rolling. This is being recorded. It will be available on our website later. So it is, the link is in the chat to our website. We're also having another session in November. So I will just put that link in the chat also here. So this is with the Communities in Transition Project about funding rural projects, how to access grant funding. And also the ACCA is having their event. I just put that in the chat also, November 1st to 3rd. So I will send that in a follow-up message to all the attendees too. And so I will introduce Dan, some of you maybe know him. I started learning about co-ops just recently, maybe last summer, and I watched his set of videos on the ACCA website. So I was pretty pleased when I heard that he could come and do this session with us. So Dan is a proud husband, father, lifelong entrepreneur, and community builder. He was instrumental in the incorporation of Sangudo Opportunity Development Cooperative in 2010. This led to working with the ACCA developing the Unleashing Local Capital program. He has spoken about the opportunity development co-ops in dozens of communities across Western Canada, the Yukon, the USA, and has inspired numerous ODCs. His work with ACCA team includes supporting new and existing ODCs, developing local investment solutions. Several recent ODCs are the Vermilion Community Development Cooperative through the PV's Industries Initiative and Homestead Investment Cooperative in Edmonton. Dan is a professional certified coach with the International Coaching Federation, a master practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming. Not sure what that is, maybe I'll ask you after the session, and has numerous other certifications which allow him to bring out the best in community leaders. So thank you very much, Dan, and I'll pass it to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kara. And I'm just going to share my screen here, make sure that that's working. There, Kara, you can help me. Can you see that now? Excellent. So huge thanks, Kara, for that, and to Dr. Lorelei and Maddie for inviting me to be a part of this, the Communities in Transition webinar. It's really exciting for me to share anywhere I can about the co-op model and how to enhance our local communities. To start this, I have a comment to make. Make sure you're sitting down because this might feel weird. So here's the comment. Rural life sucks. No, that wasn't my words. That were his words, this other guy that I was talking to. And I thought, wow, man, if that's the case, I've been very lucky all these years to live and work and play and travel in rural places where I've been. Because I think that rural is the best place to be. So that said, I know that many rural communities have and are struggling. Sad, yes. I also believe that that means there are tons of opportunities for you and I to really make some major transitions in our communities. And that's why it's really exciting to be a part of this project. We'll get into that in a little moment. But first, Kara, can you help me? Can you pull up that first poll and let's just find out how many people do live, work, and play in a rural area? Do I need to stop my sharing or can you, there you go. So I invite all of you to just put your answers in there. What is the approximate population of the hamlet, village, town, city that you call home? Just go ahead and do that and we'll see what happens here. Well, we can see the numbers wiggling and waggling all over the place. Kara, how many people do we have online? Do you know, just sort of a ballpark?
There's 38 people and 33 have voted.
Oh, excellent. So you can go ahead and you can end the poll and we'll see where we're at right now then. So it looks like a fairly large percentage we would consider rural. In fact, according to Alberta Census report, it appears that anything under about 25,000 is considered rural. That means that in Alberta, we really only have about a half a dozen municipalities that would be considered urban. So I can see that many of us are rural, so that's really great. So because you're here today, I'm guessing, and many of you are rural, I'm guessing that a lot of you would not agree with that quote that I used from that other gentleman. So let's find out about you and your home community. Kara, can you bring up that other poll, the next one there? All right, go ahead and I invite you to complete this poll. What are two of the things that you like best about your community? Go ahead and mark a however many you want, do at least 2. Oh, we've got a whole bunch that say knowing my neighbors, great restaurants, great recreational amenities, great selection for shopping, volunteering. I don't see too many that are saying there's a decent road to get you out of there. Go ahead and close that poll now, Kara, please, and let's see what the results are. Share those results. There you go. Excellent. Thank you. You can stop that there now, Kara, please. And how do we do that? There we go. Okay, let's get to the point. Why are we here today? You know, we've had a few really interesting years, especially since COVID hit, and it seems that almost every system that we have in place in our society has been tested. Our political systems, our medical systems, legal, educational systems, supply chain systems, and many others. And it seems that there has been an expansion of awareness in our society and a greater willingness to question our assumptions about what we've accepted over the years, and a willingness for many people to stand up and do something about it. We're seeing that all over the place. Now, I don't know how you feel about it all, but I believe that our new world or our new approach needs to be based on these things. Cooperation rather than competition. Sharing rather than accumulating. Oneness rather than separation. And if you really get down to the core of it, it's really about this. It's love rather than not love. And I truly believe that the core of effective communities in transition is based on this. And I think that change can be made by understanding this formula that was developed many, many years ago. It was in an organizational change formula. A guy by the name of Beckard came up with this. And what it means, D means dissatisfaction. So discomfort, unhappiness with the way it is. V stands for vision. FS stands for first steps. And RC means resistance to change. So that means that, you know, as the society is now, maybe there's some levels of dissatisfaction with the way things are, and that's okay. But we need some vision and some first steps to overcome resistance to change. If any one of the pieces in this formula are a 0, the dissatisfaction or vision or first steps, it's not going to amount to anything. So I think that where we have some dissatisfaction, what we need to do is really develop that vision of where we want to go in our communities, develop some first steps, and then we can really have some change that happens. Now, for an agenda today, we're not going to sit around and sing Kumbaya, although that might be fun, but instead we're going to look at community development as opposed to economic development. We're going to look at the co-op model and how it relates to community. We'll talk about the co-op principles that most co-ops operate by, different types of co-op that we can see, and then we're going to have some stories about opportunity development co-ops, which can be a great model to make these transitions in our community. Now, I know many of you are involved in economic development. I was looking at the list of the registrants and incredibly honorable work. Now, in our new approach, I think we need to look at it slightly differently. Now, I remember hearing this statement from someone that was way smarter than I am, and he said, what politicians and economists don't understand is this. People don't live in an economy. They live in community. And I think that's really valuable because if we explore what business is about, it's really, it refers to the efforts and the activities that are undertaken by individuals and organizations to produce and sell goods and services for profit. That's how business works. And you can do that all day long, but who are these products and services sold to? To people. People who need them or perceive they need them, and these people are part of the community. They have friends and neighbors that live close by. So as we're exploring communities in transition, I believe we need to look at this more in finding ways to increase or enhance the quality of life for ourselves, our friends, our neighbors, other citizens, and rather than from a purely economic nature. This is about health, creating health and well-being in our community. So absolutely, we need a variety of businesses to do this, and these businesses need to generate profit. Yet the focus is more on addressing those keenly felt needs of the citizens in the community rather than profit for the shareholders at all costs. Part of the well-being of citizens rather than profit. Part of the well-being is that businesses can be owned and operated by local citizens, people who live right in the community. So can we make this a little bit more engaging? Can you please give me a thumbs up or a smiley face, or let's see what people are thinking. Are we kind of on the right track here? Can you see any responses there, Kara? I can't hear what you were saying there, Kara.
Sorry about that. Yeah, lots of thumbs ups, hearts, and smiley faces.
Okay. Well, let's move on then. So history, a little bit of history about the co-op model and what's going on in our society. So we've gone through, as you can see by the screen, we've gone through in a period of time, predominantly since World War II, of unprecedented entrepreneurial growth and prosperity. According to Stats Canada, right now we have well over 1.2 million small to medium-sized enterprises in Canada. Now, these are everything from small 1 and 2 employee organizations to companies that employ up to 500 people. Now, these companies, they contribute hugely to our gross domestic product, but all that is our national cash flow. It says nothing about community health and well-being. However, they do great stuff. Now, one of the challenges that we're in right now is that well over half of these businesses are owned by the baby boomers. And a very small percentage of these people actually have any kind of a formal transition or succession plan, less than 10%. So what that means is that, in the next 5 to 10 years, over $3.7 trillion worth of business assets need to transfer. How are we going to make that happen? Because a lot of these businesses are right in your community and my community. And how are we going to make this happen? There are different ways that we can do this. Is this a challenge or is it an opportunity? I think we can look at it as an opportunity. Here are some of the different alternatives that I see from my perspective. One of the ways to transition is to sell to family members. Great idea. These business owners sell to their kids, their grandkids. However, historically, there's only 20 to 30% of these businesses that continue to be successful in the long term. Maybe the new person who takes it over just doesn't have that heart, the fire in the belly, passion to make these things work. But it's a great way to transition, especially in our communities. There's always an alternative to sell to an outside purchaser, a third party. They tend to be a little bit more successful. About 50% of these continue to succeed and operate in our communities in the long term. However, oftentimes that doesn't work. Another alternative is to just shut the doors and walk away. I have not yet met a business owner that wanted to just do this, sell inventory and real estate, pennies on the dollars, and walk away. That's not a great way. Plus, it really affects what goes on in the community. Another alternative, one we're really going to dig into today, is the cooperative model, where the local citizens or employees tend to take over the business and have a transition. These tend to be at least 80% successful in the long term. And one other alternative is to where the owner actually sells to employees through an employee share ownership plan or an ESOP. Now, we're going to focus on the cooperative model today. However, if you would like to know more about selling to employees, the employee share ownership plan, connect with me after as well, because I work a lot in both the cooperative and in this ESOP model. So let's focus on the co-op model. And before we get too far here, Kara, can you bring up that next poll to find out how many co-ops people are actually members of?
Yeah.
That's maybe not the proper way to say it, but let's do this. So go ahead and invite you to just make your answers there. How many co-ops are you a member of? 1, 2 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 10, or more than that? Let's see what we can find out. It's an amazing model, and yet many people who are members of them don't really understand how they work or actually what the co-op is. I think you can go ahead and end that poll, Kara, and let's see what the results are.
Can you see?
All right. So a lot of people are members of 2 to 3 or more, nobody more than 11. Interesting. You think about co-ops, everything from your local co-op hardware store, grocery store, to the UFAs, to all kinds of gas co-ops and utility co-ops. We're going to explore what each one of these are about. So you can go ahead and stop that there now, Kara, please. Maybe I have to do that.
Oh, should be gone.
There we go. So co-op, an incredible model. What exactly is it? I'll let you just read this definition, and this definition comes from the International Cooperative Alliance. There's some really important parts to this definition. Cooperatives are people-centered enterprises. They're owned, controlled, and run by and for their members to realize the common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations of the members. And I think you could probably add environmental needs and aspirations to this definition as well. Cooperatives bring people together in a democratic way and an equal way, whether the members are customers or employees or users or residents, or cooperatives are democratically managed by a quote unquote one member, one vote rule. Members share equal voting rights, regardless of how much capital they've got invested in the enterprise. And as businesses driven by values, not just profit, cooperatives share 7 internationally accepted principles and act together to build a better world through cooperation. They put fairness and equality and social justice at the heart of the enterprise. Cooperatives around the world are allowing people to work together to create sustainable enterprises that generate long-term jobs and prosperity in the community. This is truly communities in transition. Cooperatives allow people to take control of their local economic future in their community. And because they are usually owned by local members and shareholders, the economic and social benefits of their activities tend to stay in the communities where they're established. So and what I mean by that is that profits generated are usually either reinvested in the business and in the community where they are created, or the returns are returned to members who are invested in it. Now, if we're looking at a new approach to business and communities, I think that makes a whole lot of sense. Now, this isn't anything new. Co-ops have been around since 1844, back when in England, when the Rochdale pioneers established the first co-op in England. Now, if you think about it, Western Canada was opened up by cooperatives. Yet, I think they've taken a bit of a back seat in the last few decades until now. And hopefully you'll be able to help to re-energize this cooperative movement. So I talked about 7 cooperative principles. I'll just show those so that you can be clear on exactly how co-ops work. They're about members are, they join voluntarily. There's nobody forced to become a member of a co-op. You think about your local co-op store, hardware store, you can go in and buy products there whether you're a member or not. They're democratically controlled. That's that one member, one vote principle. It tends to be members that participate in the economic activity. So returns, profits are paid back to members through either interest or patronage returns or dividends. So members, the more business you do with the co-op, the better you do as well. They tend to be depend on autonomy and independence. They're self-governing. And because of that, and because of the member involvement, there tends to be a real push towards education to help members learn more about the governance and how to run the co-ops and to really make it their own and to make it sustainable for the long term. Co-ops tend to cooperate, they tend to work together. I'm a member of the UFA co-op, and their UFA has card lock gas stations. I'll drive across town to go buy my gas at a UFA card lock rather than stop in at a Petro-Canada or an Esso. It just tends to be the way things work. And there's a real concern for community because members typically are community driven. These are driven by values. Now, there are a whole bunch of different kinds of co-ops as well. I'll just run through a quick list of these. There are consumer co-ops. So really good examples of those would be your local co-op grocery store or hardware store, or the UFA co-op, where the farm supply stores, where consumers become members because it allows them as a group of members to possibly get better products or services or get them at a more reasonable rate because they're buying in a bigger volume. There are producer or business co-ops. Examples of these would be, if you remember years ago, there was the Alberta wheat pool, the Manitoba wheat pool. These were farmers who were members because they were producers of the grain and they were able to market their grain more effectively. Good examples now are things like up in the north is an example where a lot of artisans will pool together as a co-op where they can provide their products that they're making and then collectively market them in a bigger, more effective way. There's business co-ops, things like Home Hardware, I believe, is a co-op where the different stores, home hardwares, are members of a larger co-op where they can do a better job of marketing. There are worker co-ops. There are lots of them in Eastern Canada, in Western Canada. I don't know of so many of them. However, a really good example is Allium, which is a really neat restaurant in Calgary where the owners are of the co-op. They own the restaurant and work together. Another good example is the multicultural healthcare workers, where a group of primarily women pool together in a co-op where they're able to work together to provide greater healthcare services to people in their community. There's a Drivers Coalition of Edmonton, a co-op where people are working together. There are housing co-ops. You've probably seen these in many communities, and if you're interested in a housing co-op, great places to go are SACCA, which is the Southern Alberta Cooperative Housing Association, or NACCA, which is Northern Alberta Cooperative Housing Association. They're highly involved in helping housing co-ops come together and to work together. Financial co-ops, these are your credit unions primarily. Utility co-ops, these are your natural gas co-ops or your power co-ops, rural electrification associations. In some places, there are water co-ops where members work together to be able to provide these services effectively. There are new generation co-ops. These are a reasonably new form of co-op that are primarily for value-added agriculture or businesses that support value-added agriculture. And I'll be telling you a story about a few of these that some of you might know of. And then there's this reasonably new model called an opportunity development co-op that we're going to dig deeper into because it can have some great implications in your communities in transition. So what's the difference between these different types of co-ops? Primarily, it boils down to who owns them, who are the members. And that really is the big difference. So it's story time, but before we do that, Kara, can you just open up, are there any questions showing up in the chat or anything we need to be aware of at this point?
No questions. Everyone seems engaged with your talk. No questions yet.
Super. Well, I just invite people to, put your questions in the chat, and we will be at the end of this. We'll have lots of time to have a conversation about these different co-ops. But by all means, just put your questions in the chat. So a little bit of a story time here. I'd love to be able to see you face to face, and I always love to ask this question. How many of you have been to the community of Sangudo? Chances are, with the number of people here, not very many. It's a little hamlet, an hour and a half west of Edmonton. And if you've been there, I would ask the question, did you go there on purpose? I mean, it's not much of a community. However, a beautiful little community. It sits right on the bend of the Pembina River. Pembina River runs on 3 sides of the hamlet. Only about 300 people in the community. A great, great community. Like many communities historically, or in the last number of years, it's been struggling. And businesses closing down and all kinds of stuff happening as we see across a lot of Western Canada. Tough time. We had a bit of a crisis back in the early 2000s where the school division was threatening to close our high school. And if you know anything about small rural communities, when the school closes, that can be a nail in the coffin for what happens in the community. Well, as you can imagine, that kind of ticked off people in our community, and there were some big meetings held, and we wanted to find a way that we could help our school and to keep our community alive. A big scare. And transition in communities oftentimes comes from a bit of a crisis. This was a real crisis for us, and at that point, there was a group of people that fought the school division. It got to a legal battle, which is not fun. But anyway, the school division decided to leave the high school open for a few more years. It since has been closed, but the elementary and junior high continues to stay open. We applied at that point as a way to try to do something to transition our community. There was a program by the Alberta Recreation and Parks Association called ACE Communities. And we applied and we were accepted, which gave us the opportunity to connect with a gentleman named Ian Hill. He's out of the United States, an amazing man. He came into our community to get people fired up and excited about what could happen in our community. This program was about recreation and parks, so that was kind of the main focus of it rather than the economy. However, Ian came into our community and he shared a quote that really got me thinking, and this continually comes to my mind. He said, "My community is a direct reflection of me." So I want you to think about this. What this means is that if there are people in your community that don't have safe, comfortable places to live, that's a direct reflection of me. If there are people that don't have safe, healthy food, that's a direct reflection of me. If there are businesses closing down, that's a direct reflection of me. If there are kids that are involved in drugs and alcohol, that's a direct reflection of me. That kind of hurts. And it also helps me to realize that in my community, in your community, we need to work together to do something. Ian also used a quotation by Helen Keller. And many of you would recall who Helen Keller was. She affected change worldwide. And she at one point said this, "I'm only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do something that I can do." Well, that's powerful. I invite you to reflect on that. I will not refuse to do something that I can do. So what happened in Sangudo? Well, because of this Recreation and Parks Association support, we had a couple community coaches. We decided what was really important for our community, developed this big vision and some first steps to overcome that resistance to change. And we developed, this was a playground project, about a $250,000 project by volunteers. On one day, we had over 300 people of all ages come out to build a new playground, skate park, beach volleyball court, horseshoe pits, a bunch of other cleanup and development in our community. An amazing day. This was about 2006. And people still talk about how it really brought people together. But here's the kicker. If you walked out of the sports grounds and up to Main Street, Sangudo, not such a pretty picture, with about half of the business buildings shut down, looking a little bit dilapidated. We needed to do something different. So a group of us who had been involved in this recreation project, volunteers, we decided, how can we do something for our local economy? And we were all busy people, jobs, businesses. None of us wanted to take on a new business, but we thought if we could pool our resources, our skills, our abilities, our talent, our money, maybe we could act as a bit of a business incubator to help get somebody into some of these vacant business buildings. We looked at all kinds of ways that we could do this. We looked at a corporate model. It was just too corporate. We looked at just throwing our money into a bank account and loosey-goosey making this work. Well, that didn't look very good either. We learned that the Alberta Community and Cooperative Association had a program right then to do a feasibility study to do a co-op. Cool deal. We were all members of co-ops, but didn't know how they worked. So that's what we did. We looked at West Loch grain terminals to see if this co-op might be a way to help us in our community. Now, I don't know how many of you know West Loch. It's about an hour north and west of Edmonton. There's a big grain terminal that sits right in the town of West Loch. It used to be Alberta Wheat Pool, then transitioned ownership a number of times. The company that owned it was going to shut the elevator down, which meant the farmers were going to have to haul their grain to Edmonton. That ticked off the farmers. Don't tick off farmers. It's not a good thing to do. Local business people were disgusted about this. They were going to lose this terminal. So as local businesses and community citizens that cared, they bought the terminal. As a new generation co-op. And this is one of the most successful grain terminals in Western Canada right now, owned and operated by its members, which happen to be local community citizens. We looked at Battle River Railway, another new generation co-op. Now, the Canadian National Railway was going to sell a chunk of rail line that goes from Camrose down, kind of goes southeast to Alliance, about a 90-mile chunk of track. They were going to sell it for scrap iron. Well, this ticked off a bunch of farmers that happened to haul their grain up and down that line. And so local businesses and community people, they bought the rail line, they bought a couple of locomotives. And since then, as Battle River Railway, they've been hauling grain and oil and lumber and doing all kinds of things on that rail line very, very successfully ever since. You can see a picture in the bottom left-hand corner of some of their locomotives all painted up. They also have created a society where they bought a couple of old passenger cars, and now we're doing tourism events up and down that rail line where people go from one community to the other, murder mysteries and all kinds of fun things on there. Huge, great story of what people can do when they work together cooperatively. This is a great example too, where it wasn't just Forestburg or, it was a whole bunch of these little communities up and down the rail line that are working together to make this happen. It's an incredible story. So let's come back to little old Sangudo and the pains that we were going through. The new generation co-op wasn't exactly what we needed. We looked around at what we could do. We thought of a bakery, a hardware store, a tire shop, a car wash. None of those quite fit. And then we learned that our local abattoir, Sangudo Custom Meat Packers, was going to close down. Now, our community is traditionally primarily an agricultural community, livestock based. And this meat shop was going to close down. That was going to hurt our local community. The owner, who had been running it for over 25 years, he tried to sell it and he couldn't. He was just going to close the door and walk away. We had a couple of young guys in our community, Jeff Sanger and Kevin Meyer, the two guys you can see in the picture. They were keen to own this. However, they didn't have any experience with it. Kevin's a plumber. Jeff's an accountant. The banks laughed them out of their doors. They weren't going to provide it, weren't going to lend them the money to do it. But we believed in these guys and we knew we needed this business in our community. So we formed Sangudo Opportunity Development Co-op in 2010. We bought the real estate. The two entrepreneurs, they bought inventory and equipment. So they had skin in the game. And we worked together with them to work out a really great lease agreement where they would pay us an easy lease every month and then would give us a share of their profits every quarter. That way it's support, and they had a first right of refusal to buy the building in 3 years. That way they were, every nail, every piece of paint they put on it was helping them to grow the equity, and it was easy for them to grow the business. It made or motivated the members to want to support this as well, to make sure that the business did well. That worked really, really well. About a year after that one happened, we learned that our local Legion was going to close and sell their business, a big old hall on Main Street. We didn't want another vacant building on Main Street. So our members pooled together their money. We bought the real estate. We supported a couple entrepreneurs who were wanting to start a restaurant and a coffee shop in the community. Very much needed. So that's what they did. We worked out a similar kind of a lease to make it easy for them to renovate and to pay a fee back to our co-op based on how profitable the business was. And they also had a first right of refusal to buy the building at a pre-agreed price when the lease expired. Great model. The ink was just drying on that agreement, and the gentleman from the meat shop came back to us, and it turns out the facility was in really bad shape. They had accessed a grant. There was a partnership between the federal and the provincial government for food security and animal security. However, this was a matching grant, and they needed some cash to help with it. So our local members of our co-op pooled together some money to help them to do that, which has converted that business into a world-class abattoir meat processing facility. In fact, it's one of the only meat facilities in Alberta that is licensed to process organic meats as well. Amazing how that all worked. Now, these businesses transitioned. The meat shop, when their 3-year lease expired, they weren't able to get traditional financing from the banks. So we converted that into, we helped them to buy the business, and SODC continues to hold a mortgage. Incredibly flexible, creative way to make business work. The restaurant continued to succeed and thrive. When the 3-year lease came to an end, the owner of the business was able to buy the building outright, continued to operate until COVID hit. It was then forced to close down. However, now there's a chef that operates out of that building and producing frozen meals that she sells primarily into Edmonton. She creates over 1,000 meals a week that are now being frozen meals that are going into Edmonton, and continues to support the local community. We also realized in Sangota we had a really great supply of extremely poor housing. So our co-op pooled together some money. We bought 3 residential lots, and we built this beautiful big 1,360 square foot home with a very unique, creative financing model. Unfortunately, when the home was built, the real estate markets had kind of crashed. And so now the building, we've attracted a young family in there with kids who live there in our community and support the community as tenants. It's worked extremely well. So how does it work? How does one of these opportunity development co-ops work? Members, first off, they have to have that vision, and there has to be some structure. The co-op model has to be set up. They buy membership shares. Usually it's a fairly small amount, $200 or $250 or $500, but a reasonably small amount, so most anybody could invest in that. They also buy community shares, otherwise known as investment shares. This is the money that is invested in the project, whatever it happens to be in your community. One of the beautiful things of how this has been arranged is that members in your community can buy these shares with cash, their own money, their own savings that they've got, or they can utilize registered retirement savings plans or tax-free savings account money that they may have already put away somewhere else. You know, that money that is invested in a business in, I don't know, Toronto or New York or China. But instead, this is a way that they can redirect that money back into their community and still leave the money within those registered environments. And I haven't done it recently, but a few years ago, I recall going to some statistics, and there are billions of dollars every year that is invested in registered retirement savings plans, tax-free savings accounts, money that's generated in our communities that leaves our communities. This is a way to redirect that money right back and to help your communities transition and help them to thrive. It's an amazing thing that can happen. A key important thing here is that members are invested in the co-op. The co-op then invests in the business. What that means is that members who are invested in the co-op, they don't have the right to go and tell the business that you've invested in, how to make their sausage or how to build their home or anything like that. They're invested in the co-op, and then the returns come back to the co-op, which are then paid back to the members. Each project has its own costs and its own returns, and this is based on Securities Commission rules, so people have to know that their money is where it goes in their community. And then we talked about the cooperative principles where there's economic sharing or participation with members. So typically there's interest or dividends or some sort of a patronage that is paid back to the community members, to the members who are invested. Here's the secret. In any of these opportunity development co-ops, it's in the community, in your community, it's by the community, your community, it's for the community, for your community, to help your community to thrive. It's not necessarily about making your community grow. It is about helping it to thrive, to build that sense of well-being and greater health in the community. Here's what it does, the bigger stuff. Sure, there's the investment in the business that's great, but there are much bigger returns that you see in the community. It sparks other economic development. When you have a new business or a transition of a business, it tends to spark other things that happen in the community. It stimulates some independence and some autonomy in the community where people start to really care. It creates jobs, new jobs, part-time jobs. People come to the community to work in some of the businesses that you're supporting. It really aids in this business transition where these baby boomers are trying to find a way to retire. This is a great way to support that. And it helps those young entrepreneurs to get into those businesses where maybe traditional bank financing isn't going to work. Because of the flexibility of this, you can work out deals with these entrepreneurs that no bank would ever look at. And it supports everybody. It provides a return of investment to local investors, has them more active and engaged, not just financially, but socially, emotionally, physically, maybe even in a kind of a spiritual way in the success and the thriving of your community. It creates that well-being that we all want, where we're proud of our community. We want our communities to be places where us, our kids, our grandkids will want to work and live and play. Now, as a result of what happened in Sangudo, Maddie, you mentioned this, that the Unleashing Local Capital program was started. The Alberta Community and Cooperative Association spent a couple of years developing a guide for leaders in the communities and videos and templates to make this model available and easier for communities. And there's been some really great things that have happened and more that's happening now. Kara, I'm going to stop before I go on with some more stories of what's happened since then. Are you seeing some questions or anything we need to address at this point?
Just one question. You were talking about the price of the shares to make it accessible. Then someone asked, how much would the community shares be?
That's a really good question. And each one of these opportunity development co-ops, they lay out what those fees are going to be. Typically, the investment shares are in the range of $1,000, and oftentimes they'll have a minimum investment of $5,000 because there's some paperwork, some legal stuff that has to be done. But the idea is that if they're $1,000 a piece or maybe a minimum investment of $5,000, most people in the community can invest in those in some way. And also based on Securities Commission's rules, there are ways where people who want to be more invested can invest much more money than that as well. The whole theory or the philosophy is to have broader community engagement and investment in these projects. So rather than just having one or two people, could be 20, 30, 50, 100 people that are invested in these projects. Anything else there, Kara?
Great. No, just a comment that your stories are great, Dan.
It's such exciting stuff. So since then, as a part of that Unleashing Local Capital program, the Crow's Nest Pass Opportunity Development Co-op was developed. This group came together and they bought a historic building in Blairmore, and they did some major renovations in there. And still they have 4 residential units on the top floor that are rented out. And then they have 2 retail spaces in the lower level right on Main Street, where businesses own or operate out of those facilities. And it provides a return back to members, plus providing the access to the businesses there. Athabasca created an opportunity development co-op. Some of you might know Mike Gismondi. He was hugely involved in that. I think still is. Now, they weren't able to find a project, but I think the co-op is still in existence, and I believe that they were sort of looking at a resurgence of this again. So if any of the people here are from Athabasca, check that out, because I think that the structure is already there and all you need is a business to invest in. Over in Elnora, small community, south and east of, or close to Red Deer, they started one of these co-ops where local people invested to support a local contractor to build and then sell housing to get more families coming to Elnora. This model, there's a gentleman in BC by the name of Eden Yesh, just an incredible guy. He's learned about these opportunity development co-ops and he realized what it could do in BC. So he worked with a group of people and they went through there had to be some legal stuff that was done so that this model would fit with the BC Securities Commission, and now it's totally available. They developed the East Kootenay Columbia Community Investment Co-op, which has invested in a number of businesses down there, done some incredible work. Out on Salt Spring Island, started the Transition Salt Spring Enterprise Co-op, where they support transitions on the islands to help some of the older business people transition out and newer entrepreneurs to take over those businesses. Vanderhoof, a little further north in BC, their investment co-op supports local businesses and the transition and to help to make their communities more sustainable and profitable. Bow Valley Green Energy Co-op, this is in the Calgary area. They've done some neat projects where one of the ones where they put solar panels on an old church, I believe, and they're looking to do more of these projects as well, where it's more about green energy, which is really important in our world right now. Also, some other one, Local Investing YYC. This is another one in Calgary where they've got investors who pool their money. I believe they've got about $1.3 million now that is invested in 7 or 8 social impact businesses to really support that. And they're looking for more businesses to invest in as well. Solar Power Investment Co-op of Edmonton. They were putting solar panels on some of the downtown buildings to utilize that space. And it's up close to where the sun shines. It just makes total sense. A way to help to not to be so dependent on our, nothing against the oil and gas industry. It's extremely important in Alberta. This is just a way to add some more green energy into it. The Macaulay Development Co-op. This happened back in about 2018, 2019, where they purchased a strip mall kind of on the east part of downtown Edmonton, and they was to support. They did some renovations in the building, and it was to support some local businesses to have reasonable retail space where they could run their businesses. I know that they went through some struggles when COVID hit, but I think they're on fire again and just having some great success over there. Part of it is that local people who are then invested, they want to support these businesses to help everybody to succeed and to thrive. The Alberta Solar Co-op is a reasonably new one where they're collecting money to build some solar farms and just great stuff that's happening there. The Vermilion Community Development Co-op, this is a neat one that was incorporated about a year ago, not quite a year ago. One of the things that's happened is PV Industries has realized the power of these opportunity development co-ops. The owner of PV Industries, you might know PV Mart. Well, the owner of PV Industries, Doug Anderson, an incredible gentleman that has a 100-year vision of supporting one of these opportunity development co-ops in every community where PV has a business. And that's about 100 different communities across Canada. So this is an amazing initiative where PV is supporting these as well. And then even more recently is the Homestead Investment Co-op, which is buying a building in downtown Edmonton, where out of that they're operating a co-working space where entrepreneurs can rent space and collectively work together to have space as they're just getting going before they can maybe afford to have their own space outside of that. An incredible model that seems to be, that's working very, very well. And keep your ears open for that, because it may be an opportunity for you to invest if that's something that interested you.
Dan, I think people are starting to think about how this is going to happen in their community. Someone has a question that a couple of young fellows started installing fiber optic lines and now need funding to finish the project. Would a co-op system work for them?
Absolutely. That's a great model. And the key is to get 3 or 4 or a half a dozen local people who are interested in that to give us a call, and we can help make something like that happen. Anything else there, Kara?
No, there was a comment earlier also. I was just noticing they were talking about vertical growing opportunity in the community school, and that possibly this information would be helpful to them.
Yes, this could be a great way to make that work. In the school, if, one thing is it would take some negotiation with whoever runs the school, whether it's a school division. However, I think that could be a great way to utilize that facility. It's there already, and maybe it's a way to make that space more usable and accessible. Again, it takes 3 or 4 people in the community to come together and see the promise.
One more here. How does a person get their equity back from an investment, say if they pass away and they want to inherit the investment to someone?
Yeah, that's a good question. Part of the agreements to make these work is, first off, how you get your money in, which is those member shares and investment shares. The other is how you get your money out. Now, typically, the money is invested for a 5-year period, at which point you can choose to take it out or roll it back into the project. That also means that if there was a death or something like that, that money can be, the shares can be transferred to family members, or the money can come out as well. The point is that because the money isn't typically invested for a longer time, it's not as easy as selling shares in the stock market. But there are ways to get that money back or to transition it to other family members. The point is that the board has the right to to accept those transitions or to decide how the money is going to go out.
Great.
Anything else there, Kara?
That's all for now.
Okay. So you might hear all these stories and even these answers and think, oh, this is really easy. Well, it's getting easier. There are legal fees, absolutely. Accounting fees, because it's a business. The what's in it for me, unfortunately, sometimes egos get in the way and members become so concerned about their returns that they forget to look at the bigger project of what it does for the community. Information and sharing of information, communication with members is extremely important to people keep engaged, understand how they can be more involved, and to look at the bigger benefits that it does in the community. It helps other businesses, it brings other people to town, it helps keep real estate values up. There's such huge benefits by having these things happen. And how do you make them call? How do you make it happen? As I mentioned, the key piece is to have 3 or 4 or a half a dozen people care about the community, bring them together. Get them together to talk about what's really important. It only takes 3 people to form a co-op. Much better if you've got a few more. You know, to have some people who are known, they're liked, they're trusted, they're well respected in the community. Those are the people that can really make this happen. And this is not about those people doing it or about them having another job, but it's about people working together, you know, to invest some time and effort and energy to do some really good, meaningful work in your community. Now, this is getting much easier through Alberta Community and Cooperative Association. We're developing this local investment solutions or cooperative investment solutions to make starting one of these easier, quicker, to make it happen in a way that is not as it used to be. So this is about supporting communities to deal with the incorporation, to make that easy and cost effective, to do some of the due diligence, you know, to really look at the business case and to ensure that it's a business idea that's sustainable and it'll be profitable and it'll provide some return, not only those tertiary returns, but also some financial returns to the member, to the co-op, and to the investors. Part of this will be a connection to funders. Primarily, we're working with some of the larger credit unions now who really understand this model, and to be able to put together some funding models that will help to support these, to be able to leverage outside money to make these businesses work. And this also will connect into the Community Futures organization that is powerful with business planning and doing some of the due diligence part. It's about ensuring that these are compliant with Securities Commission rules, and we're having some great gains there to make sure that this can work. Because oftentimes these are run by community members, it's important to have some director training, and primarily because the directors are the ones who can sell these shares. So it's really nice if you've got 6 or 8 or 10 directors that can be involved in selling these shares. And to do that, it was all by paper. And now with this investment management software, a lot of this can be done electronically to ensure things are done correctly and easily, and so nothing gets missed. And then the aftercare. You know, again, it's about communication, it's about working together to ensure that these things can be in your community for the long term and for the long-term thrivability of people, health and well-being. We're going to open this up to questions again, but I just want to come back to this. Primarily, it's about you know, being aware of what's going on in your community, talking to some of the people that you know, and then not refusing to do something that you can do. It doesn't have to be on your own. This is about working together. Let's open this up. Let's have a chat. Are you okay for that, Kara?
Yeah, sounds great.
And Madeline and Lorelei, if you have any things that you can add to help with this. And Madeline, I know you've pulled together a huge bunch of resources that can be powerful here. Are you willing to share some of that?
Yeah, Kara, I can pull them up as well if you want me to do that.
I can start popping them in the chat here.
Sure, yeah, we'll throw them up in the chat, but there's as Danny mentioned, a couple of resources, but I wanted to link to some places where everyone can go to learn more about co-ops generally, or go to learn more about what ACCA does and what BCCA does, and how we can be supports for you if you choose to pursue any of these types of projects, you know, to help get you all off the ground.
Could I make a comment, Dan?
I'd love to hear comments, questions, anything.
Sure. I just kind of wanted to address it to everyone. I'm familiar with you and your work, and I worked at Community Futures in Hinton, Alberta for over 10 years. What I found in rural communities, the biggest obstacle for entrepreneurs is commercial space at a reasonable rental rate. A lot of commercial space in rural communities are owned by people who don't live in your town or are managed by people who are tasked with maximizing the profit for the owner. Many businesses I found could have been successful if their rent was much lower. So I always thought that a great opportunity for the ODC would be to purchase some undervalued or neglected commercial property, and you can become a landlord of with a patient capital approach, and it really does strengthen your community, especially if your entrepreneurs don't have to worry about having enough sales to pay their rent, because the community wants the business in its community, even though it might not be profitable, on a regular comparison type.
That's an incredible comment. What's your name?
Oh, sorry. My name is Tim. My last name is Shane.
Tim, thank you so much for that comment. And that is just a perfect example how the community can pull behind to do that. As you said, collectively buying some of those vacant or those facilities that are owned by, I'll call them foreign investors, people that are outside of your community. And a neat way too, some of those dilapidated buildings, not dilapidated, but maybe need a little bit of work. It's a great way to involve some of your local members in the co-op to be involved in doing some of the renovations, similar to the home that we built, where you've got maybe local carpenters and plumbers and electricians and people like that that can, put in their time and their efforts to, it gives them another job to do that. And they can even do that on a way where, they may not be paid for their time at that point. However, it can be paid back to them over time, as the co-op becomes more successful as well. So it makes it a little more, you don't need to come up with so much capital to do this great work. That's a really good comment that you made.
Dan, there's a comment in the chat. The Oilfields High School has been gifted a vertical grow shipping container as part of their sustainability projects. They have an outdoor garden and learning center, are upgrading the school kitchen to a commercial kitchen, and now it will be operating the vertical growing opportunity. Any thoughts on how they can provide sustainable produce to the community, make a profit, and keep the container operating year-round?
Yeah, that's a great idea. That might be a place for local consumers to form a co-op where they can support the business itself through some funding to help them, but also the producers can maybe have some extra benefit where they're able to access some of the stuff that's being produced at either just because they can access it, or it may even be at a reduced rate in some way. Is that kind of what they were meaning?
Sounds good. Sounds like good advice. I don't know if the Invermere Community Garden is a proper co-op, but it sounds similar. It's a community garden connected to the high school. Maybe you're aware of that, Denise.
I'm not, but I'll certainly check that out. Thank you.
I think it's called Groundswell.
Groundswell? Thank you.
That's a great comment too. I can't name exactly who it is, but I've heard of some communities where they have bought a co-op, a bunch of people have bought a chunk of land and then created these community gardens where they rent them out for a very minimal fee, but it allows people who don't have garden space a place to actually feel the earth and to grow some of their own produce.
Mm-hmm. We do have community gardens in Black Diamond that they are doing exactly that. And I was just thinking about how the school could set up a business model so that they could share in the produce that they're going to be providing. So they're learning about business operations, but they're learning about the technology of the grow up. They're learning about sustainable growth. It's going to be operated on solar, et cetera, et cetera. They've got a lot of our sustainability committee background supports them. But I was just kind of thinking about different ways that they can, like, if a person came in and invested $250 each, and different individuals in the community, and then they just get their produce directly from the school. Whatever they're growing, they would check off what they want to buy that month or that growing term. I'm not sure. I'm just, I thought somebody with a bigger brain might have some ideas for me.
That's absolutely incredible. And just think about our world, our society. If these kids who are going to school are seeing that and learning that, and they're growing, they grow older to be more concerned about that. It's amazing.
Denise, I'm personally interested in that also. I'm just going to put my contact in the chat if you want to stay connected after. Maybe we can talk more.
Thank you. I'll do that.
There is another comment here. As a municipal government, what is the best way to approach the community to see what the interest is? I have a new EDO/community development officer starting next week and would love to have her present options to our community, just not sure where to start.
That's a really good point. That's a great, powerful spot to be in, influential place. One of the concerns we've seen in a lot of communities is to get this into the hands of the local people. If the municipality or the economic development officer, if they can be involved in bringing the people together to sort of showing what some of those opportunities are. And then, you can provide the meeting space, the coffee, maybe the lunch to have these discussions, but it's really important to put the ownership to the community people so they take charge of it. So it's not a municipal driven enterprise. It's really, really powerful to have the local people take this on as their own. But the municipality, by all means, that's a great way to support this. Anything else there, Kara?
Nothing else in the chat.
Kara, there's a hand up.
Ah, I don't see it. I will go looking for it.
I think.
Feel free to speak if you have a
Safira,
question.
did you want to say something?
Yeah, it was me. I just thought it would be easier to talk than type.
Great.
I'm a student. I just started at the U of A and I'm doing graduate studies using community-based participatory research, which is actually really interesting. And a lot of the principles seem to align a lot with cooperative model principles. But I'm looking at, in my community of Medicine Hat, which is it's not rural by your definition, but I mean, I do consider it more rural than like, Calgary or Edmonton. We don't have a lot of kind of co-op models there. But I'm looking at how housing and care could be humanized and adapted to sort of meet the needs of a community in Medicine Hat. And like I noticed when you went through the co-op models, like those things are maybe separate models. So I'm interested like what approach you might take if a person's trying to sort of combine like affordable housing along with a co-op care model for sort of like an intentional community.
Yeah, I love that idea of the intentional community, and I think it could be a great place for this model to work. There are housing co-ops that are specifically for housing, and yet to tie that into care or beyond that, even including the food production and stuff, that it could be a great model for one of these opportunity development co-ops because of the flexibility of what they can be invested in. Again, the key is to have the support of your municipality. This doesn't have to be rural. This works well in urban areas as well. It's about people coming together, a small handful that can, that are willing to invest a little time and effort to make one of these work. There's a lot of support there now. Maddie was putting some resources there, get in touch with the Alberta Community and Cooperative Association, get in touch with me. There are lots of ways that you get some support to make this happen.
Yeah, there's fascinating, like the whole circular economy and like the environmental side of it could be also built in. There's so many layers, it's like hard to tackle it all, you know? But okay, good to know. Thank you, Dan.
There are some costs, so a key is to be able to have a business plan, even if it's a business plan on the back of a napkin to start with, where you can see there is some sustainability there.
Well, I was hoping to use my research to basically develop like a proof of concept that like afterwards could be applied to trying to pilot it or fund it. Yeah, thank you.
There's a comment for Saphira that the downtown Medicine Hat area has developed pocket gardens in the vacant lots in the downtown district. Medicine Hat have been actively redeveloping the downtown businesses for housing and new revitalized retail spaces as well. Medicine Hat is great. There's another question here, Dan. I'm curious what your thoughts might be on existing co-ops taking further steps to support their communities. For example, we're a natural gas co-op and continue to search for new ways to support, give back to the community that we serve. What are some ways that you have seen co-ops give back to their communities that are memorable or have stuck with you? And thanks so much for your talk today.
That's a good question, and I don't know that I have an answer to that. Madeline, you might be able to help based on what you've seen. However, I know that our own gas co-op locally does a lot of giving back to the community and helping with education programs and have grants where they support specific projects. I think some of the rural electrification associations also do some of that, where they're supporting educational and gardening projects in the community. I think a big part of that is just the communication, talking to the local members, especially, utility co-ops, to talk to your members at your annual general meeting. What's going on in your communities? How can we support you in a bigger way to be able to put some of our profits and the returns back to you in the community? Madeline, do you have any examples that you know of?
I'm trying to like think about local ones off the top of my head, but I have heard of, for example, like a worker cooperative that this was in Argentina, so not at all local, but you could apply the same situation and actually might work well in, I know BC, there's a serious lack of affordable childcare available. And so this local worker co-op, they funded like a childcare facility for their workers to be able to have affordable childcare while the employees were at work. But I think just want to echo what you said, Dan, about really, speaking to your community and speaking to your members and figuring out what are the needs. And I think that the co-op model can also serve community needs well, because you don't necessarily need to have patronage payouts, right? Like you can use, the co-op can decide to use their surplus for any means. It doesn't have to be patronage dividends. It could be through supporting other community initiatives that are needed. And so, yeah, just echoing what you said about figuring out where the needs are and allocating the funds there.
Your example was perfect for this comment from Teresa. She just said she's looking for ideas on how to create a hub for mom entrepreneurs / childcare / cafe. And another question about what you just mentioned was in Argentina. Did you mention a childcare co-op in BC too?
I'm not. Oh, I think there's a childcare co-op. Oh, where is it? It's called Acorn. I think it might be based in Saskatchewan. I need to look that up again, but I would search Acorn Daycare. That's a childcare cooperative that's collectively owned by parents who wanted affordable childcare. And in terms of, in BC, I can do some research, but I don't know of any off the top of my head. But we need them. I know we need them.
Right. That sounds like a natural place to convene for mom entrepreneurs / childcare. Teresa, that's
I actually, oh, sorry. there is in Vancouver, I don't think it's a cooperative, but there is a like co-working space for moms that has childcare. I'll Google that right now and throw it in the chat. That might be good inspiration.
And your comment was really good, is these co-ops don't have to be about making a big profit or return for their members. They're about, common, keenly felt needs, social needs, economic needs, environmental needs, whatever it is in the community where people are concerned. As an example of some of the returns to members, with our little Sangado Opportunity Development Co-op, we've collected and invested and circulated about $1 million worth of local money from local people. And yet the returns, some of the projects have been as little as, 1% or less. And yet they meet those needs that are important to the community. Anything else showing up for you there, Kara?
Nope, I think everyone has a lot to think about. No more questions in the chat here.
I just feel so incredibly honored to be able to, talk about this, share these ideas. I've got beautiful sun shining. Share these ideas with people in our community. I'm just so thrilled that people are concerned and caring and wanting to look for another way, something that can really help them in their communities.
Great. Well, I really appreciate it. And there's thank yous in the chat. So if there's no more questions, I think we can probably wrap things up. I'll send a follow-up message to everyone after this with the link to the recording. And yeah, hopefully we cross paths again. And thank you, Dan and Madeline and Lorelei and everyone for coming. So have a great day.
And Kara, by all means, you can share out my information. I'm happy to take emails and phone calls most anytime.
Fantastic. I will do that in the message. Okay, thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.